This conference will now be recorded.
Sorry.
As they have said, I am an AmeriCorps alum. I am so excited to be here to share my knowledge with you on grant writing, which is one of my passions now. I actually have a job in doing it. So if you could do the next slide. Okay, so go back one slide. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, great. So we're all learning in this particular process. So grants and organizations. So I wanted to share with you some, can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. So I wanted to share with you some grants and organizations. So I have categorized them in terms of the different areas that I have submitted grants in. So first, business, I have submitted grants for businesses, which are different than grants for nonprofits. So a lot of the work that we did in Disability Network it's a nonprofit, and a lot of work that you all do is in the nonprofit sector. So that is very different in terms of submitting a grant than submitting in the business sector. But I wanted to just break all of this down for you all. And so in business, I submitted a grant for the empowerment of women, teaching women communication skills, public speaking, as well as technology upgrades and personal protective equipment. I also had the opportunity when I was in higher education to submit grants in the field of higher education as well as in K through 12. The K through 12 one was the Kids in Need Foundation. It was a grant to fund classroom supplies for a nonprofit in Highland Park. So that was a nonprofit organization. I have it flip-flopped in here in terms of the dollar amounts. So I have to change that later. But anyways, the Indiana Commission for Higher Education Steps to Success Student Persistence Grant that was awarded. I was awarded almost $125,000 for that one, and that was a program for undergraduate students who were in a summer program during 2015, 2016. The results showed that the majority of the students persisted for, not only in their summer, but also in their freshman year of college. They persisted to the sophomore year of college. The Indiana University South Bend Vision 2020 grant, Mentoring Through Storytelling, the Road to Graduation grant, I was awarded $5,000 for that. And that was a mentoring program that I personally designed for the campus. And we were awarded money for that to put on different programs for undergraduate students. So they would be able to persist, in the first year of college and so on. I also submitted a letter of inquiry and a grant for a nonprofit for housing for recovering alcoholics in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So that's a part of my community service work that I have done to help out nonprofit organizations to get grant funding. And then finally, I have helped out in terms of human and health services in terms of applying for grants for a nonprofit organization, Inkster, Michigan, to provide therapy services to residents in the Detroit metropolitan area. I also applied for a grant for housing and therapy services for a nonprofit in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So this is sort of the breadth in terms of what I've done. There's also some other grants, but I just wanted to, supply you with a gist of what I have done in terms of the types of grants that I've applied for, as well as the organizations that I've applied for. Next slide. So next slide. Okay, so this is my current job description. And so it'll be, larger once you all get a copy of the presentation. But anyways, I wanted to show you a copy of the job description so you'd understand this is where I was, this is where I'm going, this is what my background is, what I have and what I don't have in terms of the description, but it doesn't matter because I still got the job. And so the first thing that you needed was a bachelor's degree and the minimum of 3 years of grant writing experience, master's preferred. So I have my PhD. So I had the educational requirements that were needed for this particular position. I also had experience as a college instructor, a researcher, a project manager, an evaluator. So I came with some highly recommended skills. Knowledge requirements, you need excellent writing skills. My background has provided me with excellent writing skills, excellent communication skills. I had that, as well. Project management skills, I had that in terms of, that was something I did on my resume with regards to the work that I've done at previous institutions. Knowledge of curriculum development is important. I've been a previous college instructor, so I had experience designing curriculum, computer savvy, and use of various technology is a plus. So I've done that in previous places that I've worked. Exhibits knowledge of various federal, state, or local funding sources. That was very important as I have helped out different nonprofit organizations to fund their organizations. I have had to search for federal, local, or local funding streams. So I had that on my resume. Exhibits ability to handle grant proposal process from start to finish. I had that experience under my belt. So it made it easy to, sell to my current supervisor that I had that particular experience. Exhibits understanding of how to follow a timeline and manage budgets. Again, I had budgets that I had done at previous institutions, as well as I was a treasurer of one organization at one of the institutions that I worked at. I also managed the budget as a director at one of my previous jobs, as well as managed budgets for different grants. So I had that particular experience. Ability to meet deadlines with little oversight, that's a given. I'm a deadline-driven person. And then finally, ability to communicate effectively with clients, team members, and funders. That relationship building piece is very key that you'll learn as I continue to go through the presentation. So that's sort of what was needed. I had, again, the education experience. I had about 1.5 years of grant writing experience during the time of getting the job. But again, I got the job. So she, liked my background and was able to hire me, as well as 14 other people for the different roles. So next slide. So I'm going to do this presentation: who, what, where, when, why, how. And so who can write a grant? Essentially, what I'm trying to say to everyone is that anyone can write a grant, right? And so the occupational handbook does not have a the position description for a grant writer, but if you put together fundraiser and technical writer, then you have essentially a grant writer, okay? And so as long as you can raise money and donations for an organization, which is what is required, especially at nonprofits, you can be a grant writer. Identify and contact potential donors. That is going to be, particularly important as you are doing grant writing, as well as writing a letter of introduction to, a prospective client for, funds for your client. That's going to be particularly helpful when you are doing grant writing. Researching prospective donors, it's going to be particularly helpful for you to have research experience, because if you're writing that letter of introduction, you're going to have to research, like currently I'm researching Fortune 500 companies to apply for a current client. And so she has that, background of, working with Fortune 500 companies. So I'm trying to get other Fortune 500 companies to pick her up. And so I'm asking for a specific dollar amount for her, so that we're able to get her funded for, her funded for, 2021. Keeps records of donor information. So you want to definitely keep records of your funder, your funding streams and what you've applied for, what you've won and what you didn't win. So in a Microsoft Excel database or a Microsoft Word database or whatever database your respective employer has. does. And that also is important, so that, you know, when you're applying for jobs or you're trying to sell yourself in your own business, that you have a record of what it is that you've done well and what it is that, you know, you're still growing in. And then organize campaigns or events to solicit donations. So that's important to do as well. Right now, we're working on a campaign for the foreclosure crisis. And so, you know, we're not necessarily soliciting donations, but we are doing a campaign, you know, for the foreclosure crisis. And we have sent out a mailing for that in the form of a postcard, so that people are able to work with a particular lawyer on this particular project. Use online platforms to raise donations. That's a given. So you work with your organization to work with their online platforms that they have to get donations. And finally, perform evaluation of fundraising events. So evaluation, as I'll say, you know, later in this presentation, is so important. So looking at what works, what doesn't work. Are you going to use qualitative data? Are you going to use quantitative data? And I'll explain what that means later in the presentation. And then next, you want to be a technical writer, right? So you want to determine the needs of the users of technical documents. So what are their needs? Are they asking for, do they need housing for their clients? Do they need counseling services for their clients? Do they need services for their clients? So whatever the needs are, you want to determine what the needs are so that you can develop a program or a project for your clients for the grant. And then you want to write or revise supporting content. So with a grant, we're always writing and revising the content. So every grant or every letter of inquiry is very different. But as long as you have a master grant that you're doing, you know, you can always just cut and paste. So it makes it easier once you write the first grant to write the second grant, to write the third grant, to write the fourth grant, and etc. And then thirdly, you want to communicate complex and technical information clearly. And so when I said before, when I was talking about, I did business grants, I did housing grants, I did education grants, I did health and human service grants. Those are technical information. And so there are specific terms that you're going to want to use when you are applying to, say, the Department of Education, the Department of Human and Health Services, the Department of Housing. You know, you might want to know HUD or, you know, other different terminology. And then also getting statistics from the Department of Education, getting statistics from the Department of HUD, you know, for housing. And so you want to know the specific terminology so that you're able to communicate that clearly within the grant application. Also, you want to talk with the clients about their needs. I can't stress that enough. You need to know what their needs are so that you're able to address their particular needs. And finally, collect feedback to update and improve content. So it's important that you are continuously getting feedback so that you're able to do the grant better, because you don't win every grant, but you enhance every grant, and maybe by the next time you apply, you'll get it. Next slide. So what are the different types of grants for organizations? So I've listed all of them out. So you have foundations. So there's like the Robert Wood Foundation, federal grants from like the federal government. You have state grants from like the state of Michigan or state of New Jersey or whatever state that you're applying for. Local grants like the Detroit Medical Center or the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. And then you have business grants that are specifically for businesses. There are minority-owned, you know, business grants. There are women business grants. There are grants for mothers. You know, you just have to do a search for those particular grants. And then finally, there are capital fund, you know, grants. Next slide. So where can you find grants? So there are a number of places where you can find grants. Your employer is definitely the #1 person to figure out how to find grants. They have past grants that they may have applied for or awarded. And so you want to ask them, hey, you know, if you have past grants, can I see a copy of your grant so that I'm able to build on the grant, because also your employer will have the history of the grant, especially if they've written a grant before. So they may have history of what their mission statement is, what their vision statement is, what their goals are, and so on. And so it's so important to know what they have in their archive so that you're not duplicating, efforts. Internet searches are another place to find grants. So you can do a Google search. That's where I found a lot of business grants, because there are not a lot on the different, other websites like Grants Watch. It has some business grants, but I found more business grants doing a Google search. And finally, grant databases. So these are ones where you have to pay for them. And so, you might have to ask your employer, hey, it might be worthy to invest in a grant database, such as Foundation Center. At my job, we use Grant Watch, grants.gov. Well, grants.gov, that's a free one. But there's just a lot of paperwork that you have to, use to apply for those particular grants, because, it's worth a lot of money. So you got to pay a lot. I mean, you have to spend more time in doing those particular grants. And then there's also a grant for Foundation Search and GuideStar, as well as GrantStation. Next slide. So when do you apply for grants? So there's a funding cycle that you use to apply for grants, okay? And so there's typically the winter/spring cycle, December to May, and then there's a summer cycle, June to August, and finally a fall cycle, September to November. Next slide. And so how do you apply for grants? So there are two ways that you apply for grants, right? So you either have the shorter version of the grant, which is the letter of inquiry, which is where you write a short version of the grant, which is about 2 pages, 2 to 3 pages, or the full grant, which could be, 3 pages to 11 pages. It all just depends on the funder. And so the short version of the grant includes an introduction to the organization, a need statement, you tell them the problem, you include some statistics if you have some. You also can search online for statistics, and you also tell them the solution. So why is your program the solution to the problem? You also have a budget, an evaluation plan, and a sustainability plan. And the full grant has the executive summary, the abstract, the introduction to the organization. So it includes the mission statement, vision statement, goals, etc. It also includes a statement of need, which is the same as the need statement. It also includes the project/program description. It includes a timeline, evaluation, budget, and sustainability plan. So let me give you an example of a grant in terms of the need statement. So let's say, and this isn't one that I've done, but I've just sort of put this together in my head as an example. So let's say we're all in this pandemic, right? And let's say that minority populations and low income have reported that, there are higher numbers of folks who have died from the pandemic. And so there's a lot of grief. And so what we're wanting to do is develop this program to address the grief in the minority population as well as low income population. So we'd say, this is the need, this is the problem. Here are the statistics on low income as well as minority populations who have suffered from the pandemic. And then finally, here is the program. The program is a therapy program that is going to address grief so that there can be employment as well as education opportunities, because we know when we're dealing with grief that folks can be in a position to, not be in the same place as they are when they're not in grief. And so they might not be as focused. And so we want to make sure that they're focused. And so as a result of having this particular program, we're going to have better employment outcomes and better educational outcomes as a part of this pandemic program, which will result in us being able to, keep folks in society dealing with grief. And the timeline of the program may be 6 months. The evaluation of the program, we're going to see what works, what did not work for the program, And we're going to use survey data, a pre-test as well as a post-test, as well as a focus group of some of the folks to see if it worked and what didn't work. And then the budget for the program is going to be $100,000, and we're going to include staff in terms of a therapist, as well as providing free services to the provides free services, or at least 2 counseling sessions to the clients that have dealt with grief. And then we're going to sign them up for additional services, based on their insurance. If they don't have insurance, then we'll sign them up for insurance. And the sustainability plan will be to get additional donations, as well as get grants, as well as sign up additional clients. So there is sort of what a grant sort of looks like for this particular sort of pandemic program. Next slide. So these are some lessons I've learned in grant writing. So one, you want to be confident in your writing. So that's something that I cannot, say more of, as long as you're confident in your writing, then, the sky is the limit. Again, I can't emphasize more the need to figure out what your client's needs are. So again, do they need housing? Do they need therapy? Do they need education? Do they need services? What are their needs? And then you build a program to, address their particular need within the organization. You can apply for multiple grants. You will not get all grants. You will not get all grants the first time, so you want to apply for multiple grants. You can use the same application. You can also review the guidelines of the grant and apply based on those guidelines, and then have someone else review your, have someone else on your team review your grant and obtain feedback. Because for the most part, if they're finding issues with your grant, let's say you ask for too much money, then, or you have typos, then the grantor is going to find those same particular issues. And remember, it's important to get feedback from the organization if you don't win a grant. So for instance, at one of the organizations that I recently applied to, we didn't get the grant, and they said that, you guys asked for too much money. We're building a relationship with you all, but you asked for too much money. So we asked for $75,000. They didn't want to give us $75,000 because we're a new startup. We're just building a relationship with them. However, if we had asked for less money, they probably would have given it to us. So now we're working on revising the grant application so that we're able to, resubmit it again. Another example is that there was a bank that we're working with, and they pretty much said, well, we give out grants to people who are already have an established relationship with us. And so we didn't have a banking relationship with them or a bank account with them. So we pretty much didn't get the grant for that one either. So that led me to believe that a lot of the grant writing that you're going to do is going to be based on relationships. And so building those relationships is going to take time. However, it's important to move on to the don't, side of grant writing. Don't doubt yourself, because there can be a lot of doubt within doing the grant writing. And don't feel discouraged if you don't get the grant. Again, grant writing is very competitive, and right now everyone is applying for grants. So sometimes you may have to just, submit a letter of inquiry to somebody, and a letter of introduction to a company in order to get a grant or get funds, and get your name out there so that you're able to get a grant. Also, you want to never apply for a grant for which the organization is unqualified for in the first place. So for instance, there are a lot of COVID grants out here now. And so the COVID grants want you to be in a position where you have had a loss. So if your organization has had a loss, then you can get funds for your organization. However, if your organization did better in the pandemic, then you're most likely not going to get that grant. Okay, and so you want to not, if your organization did better, then you want to not apply for the COVID-19 grants, but there may be other grants that come out later for you to apply for. Also, don't apply for small grants if your organization wants larger grants. So there are grants that are for $100, $200, $1,000, $2,000. Some of those are probably easier to get, than the $5,000 grants or the $10,000 grants or the $100,000 grants or the $500,000 grants. So, but you want to see what is the amount that your program costs and what amount, does your organization want you to apply for. And finally, don't be afraid to ask questions of your clients. So I always ask multiple questions of my clients so that I can get to understand what their needs are, as well as add to their applications. Next slide. So I wanted to put a text in here because I'm not the full expert in terms of doing grant writing. I've done some grants, but I'm still growing, I'm still learning. So I put in the text of the complete book of grant writing. It's a great book. It includes letters of inquiry and includes grants, the different grant sections. So I actually have a copy of the book. I recommend for a copy of this book just because it provides you with all the breadth of what it is that you need and all the details that you need to include in your grant. And then finally, next slide. Questions?
Okay, I am going to start off with the question that I had since no one has one.
Okay.
When you said about the different grant databases and you have to pay for them, do you know which one is specifically cheaper? Because I went into one and I was like, okay, I could do this, and I'm filling it out, and it was like $128. I was like, oh no, bag out. So do you
Well,
know which ones, like in particular, are probably like a little bit cheaper?
I think Grants Watch may be $99. I can't remember what it is, but it's not about the price. It's about what do you get from the grant, right? Because here you're making an investment. And so, does it send you the link of like Grants Watch is great because it sends you the description of the grant, the link to the grant. And so you're able to go to the web page and it also gives you contact information of the grant of the funder. And so that's what the investment is in. So you want to really, do your research. So now that you have that different list, I'm not sure about the pricing of it, but now that you have that list, it's going to each one of them and saying, well, except for grants.gov, and saying, well, what are they going to provide me with if I become a member? Because paying $199, if you're able to get, or $128, if you're able to get a lot of information and you can save that information, it might be worthwhile to make that investment in that particular, grant program. So it just all depends.
Okay, thank you. Crystal said she had a question. Oh.
Yes.
Yes, hi. Several times during the presentation, you referred to, and I'm using air quotes, the client. Always ask the client, what their needs are and things like that. Who exactly is the client? The way that I see, if I'm writing a grant for a company for which I work, is the company for which I work the client, or how exactly is that?
Yeah, so your company or your organization, your nonprofit would be the client. So like where I work at now, we work with nonprofit organizations. So I say, this nonprofit organization is the client. This business is the client. And so whoever you're working with is the client. And then you're also applying for a grant to a particular funder. So the funder is the person that provides you with the money. So like, let's say Bank of America has a grant. So they are the funder, or they are the grantor. So they're the people that provide money to fund your organization.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So when you sign up for the grants website and you pay your subscription, does the subscription ever expire, or is that like a lifetime membership?
Well, it depends on what it says when you sign up. So like Grants Watch, like you pay $99, I think, for an entire year. So it's not like a lifetime membership. So you have to really look on the website to see what is it that they're offering in terms of their packages. And again, I cannot, emphasize more, stress more than the need to just research it first and see what it has to offer before making a financial contribution.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Okay, if there are no more questions, we will send out Ezella's presentation, and I will send out the presentation along with the recording for everyone else who was not able to make it. And I will CC Ezella on there with her contact information, just in case you have a question later, and if you want to ask her, you can definitely ask her. I'm pretty sure she will be open to answering your question via email.
Yes, I will. Thank you so much.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
for the
you.
information. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Very informative.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.